Some of the worst decisions people make feels completely right in the moment. There is something that called intoxicating emotions. This is when your feelings become authority. The phrase popped up in my head from nowhere, unbeknownst to me that it was actually a real thing. Here, I thought I was making something up. But we know what intoxicating means. We know what the feelings are. So if we put those together, we know what intoxicating emotions can mean. The term is a phrase that describes feelings that can be overwhelming, thrilling, and addictive, much like being under the influence of a substance. It is used to describe intense positive emotion, such as euphoria and excitement. But it also can refer to intoxicating, addictive nature of negative emotional state. Have you ever noticed that some of the decisions that damage your life the most also felt right in the moment? The relationship felt right. The reaction felt justified. The impulse felt honest. And the attachment felt real. And yet, somehow, what felt emotionally true led you into confusion, dysfunction, regret, and cycles you promise yourself you'll never repeat. That's the dangerous thing about emotions. They can be deeply real without being deeply reliable. We live in a culture that treats feelings like truth. Follow your heart, we say. Trust your feelings, we suggest. Do what you feel is right, we command. But what happens when feelings are shaped by wounds instead of wisdom? What happens when loneliness disguises as love? When validation feels like peace? When attention feels like connection? When temporary relief feels like healing? But not everything that feels good to you is good for you. And not everything that feels painful is wrong. Let that sink in just a little bit. And sometimes they're echoes of unresolved patterns trying to pull you back into familiar dysfunctions. In this episode, we're going to talk about the difference between emotional honesty and emotional authority. Because emotions should be acknowledged, but they should not always be obeyed. So, if you ever look back into a season in your life and wonder, why did I ignore these warning signs because they felt right? This conversation is for you. When emotions feel right but lead you wrong. What's going on, my curious and intellectual people? Welcome back to Intriguing Insights, where deep conversations meet everyday life, looking beyond the obvious to uncover meaning, challenge assumption, and find wisdom in places most people overlook. Some of our strongest feelings are also deceptive. We naturally assume intensity equals accuracy. If something feels strong, we think that it must be true. But all emotions don't just come from truth. They also come from fear, wounds, pride, insecurity, desires, trauma, loneliness, and past experience. A feeling can feel real, while the conclusion you draw from it is false. You can strongly feel rejected when you're actually just being corrected, abandoned when someone is simply unavailable. Peace when you're actually avoiding responsibility, or urgency when you're actually operating from anxiety. That's why strong emotions are not always trustworthy emotions. The deception happens because emotions are immediate. They speak fast, loud, convincing. But wisdom usually speaks slow. The emotion is real, but the interpretation is distorted. That's why it's important to develop emotional maturity. Emotional maturity is not becoming emotionless. It's learning to examine them before agreeing with them. Instead of saying, I'm feeling it, so it must be true. Mature people ask, why do I feel this? What is this emotion connected to? Is this feeling leading me to wisdom or impulse? One of the most dangerous things you can do is give unquestioned authority over to your emotions. Because whatever controls your emotions can eventually control your decisions, including other people who play on them. And sadly, many people are not living off of truth. They are living from emotional reinforced patterns. Most people aren't being destroyed by bad intentions. They're being led by unchecked emotions. Most people don't wake up trying to ruin their lives, damage relationships, sabotage opportunities, or drift from their purpose. A lot of destruction begins from unmanaged emotions, not evil intent. There's a line between malice and emotional immaturity, and not being destroyed by bad intentions, but being led by unchecked emotions is where the line is drawn. There's a line between malice and emotional immaturity. And not being destroyed by bad intentions, but being led by unchecked emotions is how that line is drawn. Damage people cause is often not a calculated plot to hurt you, but rather the chaotic fallout from them failing to manage their own feelings. So, what does that mean? It means good intentions are not good enough. We can mean well, but still have destructive behavior because emotional regulations is poor. And this tends to happen when we have feelings that are the driver. And of course, the popular hurt people, which can be a legitimate excuse for a while. But over time, just the irresponsible neglect to process the inner pain. Emotions are indicators, not commanders. A feeling can reveal something without revealing the full truth. Pain does not always mean danger. Desire does not always mean alignment. And comfort does not always mean peace. Emotions are powerful signals, but not ultimate guides. They reflect our current state and our environment, but they do not always reveal the deeper truth of who God created us to be. Often, emotion like fear, insecurity, or the desire for approval lead us to settle into roles and relationships that limit our growth. Recognizing the gap between feeling and truth is the first step to transformation. Now, this doesn't mean ignore your emotions, but rather put them in their proper place. Because emotions matter, but they were never meant to lead your life. I mean, they're God given gifts used for a purpose. And that is the way that we're supposed to utilize them. They're not meant to be drivers, to be authority, to be leaders and governors of the decisions of our lives. They signal, pointing to something that is happening internally. Fear, disappointment, excitement, loneliness, anger, insecurity, joy. But a signal is not the same as direction. And when our emotions go unchecked and we have the ideology or the mindset that because you're feeling it and the feeling feels real, that it must be true, then it becomes directing our lives. It becomes a pattern, the emotional memory to continue to act out in that same behavior, even if the result from this direction leads us the wrong way. For example, think about the light in your car. The light matters. If you ignore it, you can create bigger problems later on. But the light is not the driver of the vehicle. It's the informant to inform you of the problem that needs attention. That's the same with emotions. Feeling anxious doesn't automatically mean danger is present. Feeling rejected doesn't mean you're always worthless. Feeling discouraged doesn't mean that you should quit. And when you're feeling angry, it doesn't mean retaliation is wisdom. Emotions tell you what you are experiencing, not necessarily what's true. And here's where the problem happens. When people stop consulting their values, their purpose, their faith, or wisdom, and starts obeying whatever emotion is the loudest in the moment. Emotions are temporary. Commanders make permanent decisions. Most people damage relationships, abandon purpose, stay stuck, or compromise identity because of anger, fear, comfort, loneliness becomes their commander. Unchecked emotions become leaders, and leaders determine direction. Maturity isn't about having fewer emotions. It's learning to feel deeply without being controlled completely. You can admit, I feel disappointed without believing, so this means I failed. You can say, I feel insecure without deciding, so I must shrink myself. There is power in separating what you feel and what you do. Emotionally healthy people don't suppress what they feel. They examine them, process them, and respond intentionally. Emotions are passengers, but they were never meant to steer the wheel. Wisdom is learning to pause before partnering with the feeling. The goal is not to become emotionless. The goal is to learn to feel deeply without surrendering leadership to every feeling that appears. Instead of instantly reacting and internalizing the feeling as ultimate truth, you pause to observe it. Most people don't realize how quickly they form an agreement with emotion. A feeling shows up, and within seconds, they believe it. Disappointment comes and becomes nothing ever works out for me. But wisdom interrupts that process. Wisdom says, before I agree with it, I must examine it. Because feelings come fast, but wisdom arrives slow. The person you become is what you repeatedly partner with. If you partner with insecurity, insecurity becomes your identity. But if you partner with truth, wisdom, purpose, and faith, even when your feelings disagree, your life starts forming around something more stable than your feelings. That pause between feeling and agreement, that's where maturity grows. That's where transformation begins. So, let's put this thing to work. Let's make it practical and apply it to our lives. So, try these. Pause before emotional driven decisions. Ask, what is this emotion trying to protect? Separate temporary feelings from permanent truths. Build habits of reflection before reaction. And lastly, stop asking only, how do I feel? And start asking, what is true? What is wise? And who am I becoming? If this episode has helped you realize that you have been suppressing, denying, rejecting, abandoning what you felt, and subconsciously were allowing them to lead and direct your life, even if the result wasn't good, or you haven't been taking the time out to evaluate, examine, and process those feelings without making a lifelong decision. Subscribe, click that like button, or share with someone who is not understanding the process of what it takes to become emotionally mature, to utilize them as an alert or a warning to let us you know that something needs your attention, and that attention causes you to pause for a second, reflect, and evaluate it, and align them with your values, your purpose, and your goals. Because one thing that I learned in my journey is feelings are here for a reason, and they are important. They are to help us, guide us, and lead us in the direction or the path that God wants you to go. So share this with someone that you think that this might help them with. And remember, clarity doesn't come from easy answers, but from the courage to ask the hard ones. So stay curious, stay open, and keep looking deeper. Peace.